On today's episode of the Locked On Knicks podcast, I am once again joined by DJ Zullo of Knicks Film School to break down the Knicks non-spacers, how they could be utilized better, and does this team actually have championship personnel? We get into it next on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey, what's up, guys? My name is Gavin, Schall, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster's favorite play-by-play broadcaster, credentialed NBA media member, and yes, your Saturday co-host of the Locked On NBA podcast. I want to remind you that you are tuning into Locked On Knicks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, your daily podcast on the New York Knicks. Give you the most detailed insight on your favorite team 5 days a week, and be sure to join thousands of other Knicks fans in subscribing on both YouTube and your favorite podcast platform for the best insight on your favorite team every single day. I also want to remind you that if that's not enough for you, you should tune into the Locked On Knicks newsletter. That's right. Your favorite pod now has a newsletter. Sign up for free now at lockedondaily.com. That's lockedondaily.com, and start your day with the all new free Locked On Knicks newsletter. You get writing from myself, Alex Wolf, our team of national writers here at Locked On, and of course, Josh Lloyd giving you the tips and tricks you need to win your fantasy basketball league. On today's show, we are continuing with DJ. If you missed part one, well, X out of this episode, go back, listen to part one, make that your first listen today, and then jump back into part two. We are continuing our conversation on the Knicks offense and how Tom Thibodeau might be letting them down, how he can better maximize the spacing even when non-shooters are on the floor. Then we get into the Knicks defense. Is there actually anything to be done? Will Mitchell Robinson be the key to the Knicks turning their season around there? And then finally, if this team actually has championship personnel or not. All that and more coming up next here on Locked On Knicks. Point on the starting lineup and keeping Harden there, I have come down to a place where I'm with you. And like early in the season, I think I was like leaning a little more into like, all right, let's see what true 5-out looks like. And to be clear, I don't think it's a bad idea to try both versions of that and see if they work. And I think one of my biggest indictments on Tom Thibodeau is you've had this golden window of opportunity to do that where OG Anunoby was out for a long time. Like you could have, obviously that's we both think OG should be out there. And the OG Deuce combo in particular, I'm pretty sure, I haven't looked recently, but it was one of the Knicks' best two-man combos, something like plus 18 per 100 possessions on the year. And then when Josh missed these last few games, I thought like golden opportunity to try it. And like he just did not want to look at it and like it not even look at it as a starting lineup. Like they just don't really get to it at all, which is stunning because that lineup on the year, I'm going to scroll down to my notes here because I pulled it up, plus 42. The starting lineup with Deuce for Mikal is plus 42, just over 100 possessions, way too small of a sample size to extrapolate anything definitive, but that is a good sign that it works. And to your point, Deuce, I think B-Ball Index had a stat earlier in the year that he was like a top 3 screen navigator in the NBA. That is nominally the main thing you want out of Mikal Bridges defensively. And then just not to lose the force that Josh Hart brings to the lineup. It is almost the best of both worlds in that you have the offensive ceiling that you got from Cat's ability to bomb away from deep, and you still have some of that core toughness that like the team clearly lost some of sans Dante, sans Randall to a lesser extent, sans Isaiah Hartenstein with Deuce, with Brunson, with Hart out there. So I think we're absolutely on the same page with that. The next offensive adjustment I was curious your take on is how can the Knicks, like when he is on the floor, better maximize Josh Hart? Because I mentioned like Cleveland with Mobley, obviously like Memphis starts Zach Edey at times. They play a bunch of bigs like outside of Triple J and Jay Huff that don't shoot the ball well. And yet it feels like these teams all find a way to space, even with total non-spacers on the floor. And some of that, to your point, is just Josh Hart's willingness to shoot. Not only has like the volume gone down, but the accuracy has gone down. And when November 40%, December 43%, January 25%, February 21%. So he has to shoot more, but I'll give Tibbs a little credit. I thought it was a good adjustment to involve Josh more in the action. And in particular in the third quarter, I think buoyed by the fact that Deuce was out there, you saw him screening for Jalen Brunson a whole lot. And that kind of got Brunson going as he had just like a string of possessions where he was able to go right downhill on Luke Cornett, hit a 3 in Cornett's face, and take advantage of the fact that the guy that Boston is completely ignoring is now in the action, and therefore you can't ignore him.
Yeah, having him in the action needs to be and I think it's more of him as the screener. I'm less confident with Hart as the ball handler in terms of like running like a high amount of high ball screens, because it's just, to me, it's an easier switch to make for a defense. You can reliably go under those screens. There's a limitation with him as a scorer with the ball in his hands, I think would render that maybe a below average action on a point per possession. But I think him screening has just been, even going back to last year, preseason they really were utilizing that, because at the Hornets in the first, I think they played in the first 2 games, or at least the first one in the preseason. And they immediately had, I think, Nick Richards guarding Josh Hart in that first or second game. So it's been something they've had to deal with. And when he's been the screener, there's limitations there, because his roll ability is, you don't have the lob threat, you don't have the pop threat. So, it limits things in that regard, but it does put pressure on the big that's guarding him. And I think that's got to be part of it. And, it's just not other teams that have a non-shooter that is, a 6'10" big that can sort of utilize other avenues to generate the impact, I think work out a little better. I think the thing I worry about with Hart is that, the shooting waxes and wanes. We know that it fluctuates. And the fact that he is a good screener, not a great screener, I think puts limits on where the team can sort of utilize his skills when he's involved in the action, because I don't think you want to make Cat a floor spacer in terms of like possession over possession. I think you need to utilize your best players.
Yeah.
What did happen in the Boston game is that they used Hart to screen for Cat. He got an and one out of it. I thought that was a fantastic way to utilize Hart screening, get Porzingis involved with Cornets. You have the 2 bigs in the immediate action. Cat goes away from the screen, rejects it, but he's got the whole open side because they emptied the corner out, and then there's no rim protector there because the 2 bigs are involved in the action. So there are ways to utilize Hart to tap into his skills a little more, but there's always going to be a pretty hard ceiling if your goal is to tap into the Hart in the action. And it's like the extreme version is like when Achua is in the game, great adjustment is to involve him in the action, but then, that has its own negative trade-offs when he's involved. So I think if for this team to really reach their ceiling, like their 2 best players, like that 2-man game has to be the thing they rely on. But if teams are switching and they're not afraid of it, and the Knicks rarely went to the Brunson Cat pick and roll the Boston game because they knew it would advantage because of the switching aspect, then you get back to the structure of the team just fundamentally flawed when your 2 best players can't even have that synergy to play off each other in a way that we thought before the year was going to be, and has shown against certain teams to be one of the most lethal 2-man actions in the NBA. Against the great teams, it just isn't, because of the ability for teams to switch it and feel comfortable with whatever the outcome is going to be.
Yeah, I do think one thing that felt significant to me in the Cleveland game and flew under the radar because it was such a term I can't say show of a ball game, was like when Deuce was out there, the Knicks could go to Brunson and Cat and Cleveland would switch it, but because there was shooting across the rest of the lineup, they couldn't bring that hard double, and Cat did have a lot of success going at someone like DeAndre Hunter. The Boston makes that more complicated because just everyone in that lineup are such solid post defenders, and they are just so clinical, helping off of like someone doesn't even have to be a non-shooter. They could be like kind of like a non-shooter, like Bridges is sometimes, and they're still willing to bring that help. And then and then maybe it just comes down to like, even if Cat is efficient posting up, does Cat being a great, not even a great post-up player match the Celtics and Cavs, who are just 2 of the great offenses in NBA history? In Cleveland, who's like average shot is just like a Kevin Durant shot. That is probably not enough. And then that gets down to your point. Like the Knicks can execute well against this, and they can actually put together an ecosystem that allows their best players to do what they do best. But because neither Brunson nor Cat are like inherently like, and maybe this isn't like the main issue, but it's part of it, like high volume, self-created, like 3-point shot guys, like it just doesn't work unless the other three guys around them work closer to what Boston has, where like you have three guys who can catch a dribble, make decisions. And like in the case of like Derek White and Kristaps Porzingis, shoot from 25, 26, 27 feet away. And I know that's something that you and Benji both emphasize. I think I've drove it home, is that like the Knicks can make all the personnel adjustments in the world, and Boston is still a better team at the end of the day. I think they are. I don't think they're discussed like the Kevin Durant Warriors were, and I think that is a mistake, and maybe something that'll be rectified if they, God forbid, win like 3 championships in a row or 4 championships in a row. But I think they are just a perfectly built basketball team. I think the premise of this Knicks team was that like if you get the right shooting variance in a series, if Jason Tatum pulls a hamstring and misses 3 games, like you're putting yourself close enough that you can take advantage to just some of like the randomness of basketball. And I think without some of the adjustments we're talking about, they're actually not close enough for that to even matter. But before I let you go, I wanted to hit the defensive end of the floor, where I do think I put it less on Tom Thibodeau and more so on the idea that, one, Boston is just that good. And like going through like some of your film breakdown, is watching some of what Steve Jones was tweeting out. Like it just seems like the Knicks can execute well. They can make smart adjustments, and Boston has counters for everything. How much of like the Knicks struggles there do you pin on personnel? And like, do you think there are adjustments to be made, or do you think that's just a case of like, at least without Mitchell Robinson, and maybe even with Mitchell Robinson, this team just is what it is, and they can play hard, they can play focused, and even if they weren't all the time, like, but when they do those things, like it still might just not be enough. All right, guys, when we come back here on Locked On Knicks, we're gonna spend a little bit more time talking about the Knicks defense. Is it plausible that Tom Thibodeau has the answers, and will not Mitchell Robinson make the difference? We get into that in just a sec. But first, I want to tell you about some of our newest friends here at Locked On Knicks over at Robinhood. With Robinhood Gold, you can now enjoy the VIP treatment, receiving a 3% IRA match on retirement contributions. The privileges of the very privileged are no longer exclusive with Robinhood Gold. Your annual IRA contributions are boosted by 3%. Plus, you also get 4% APY on your cash in non-retirement accounts. That's over 8 times the national savings average. The perks of the high net worth are now available for any net worth. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. To receive your 3% boost on annual IRA contributions, sign up at Robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rates subject to change. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold at $5 a month for 1 year from first match. Must keep funds in IRA for 5 years. Go to Robinhood.com/boost. Over 8 times the national average savings account. Interest rate claim is based on data from the FDIC as of November 18th, 2024. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold LLC.
Yeah, I think it's mostly personnel, because they vary their coverages. And just talking about the Boston game, like, there was some drop. There was some switching, and Cat actually defended in space well against Tatum a couple of times, against Jaylen Brown. And then you run into situations where, it's campaign, it's Cat, that's the players in the action. They have a Porzingis, Tatum, Porzingis, Derek White pick and roll. Knicks switch it, and then Porzingis just walks Cameron Payne under the rim, gets an and one. Next possession, they run it again. Knicks don't want to switch it. Now Porzingis can reliably pop out to the top of the key, wide open 3, makes it. So it's like there's so many areas where you can sort of pick at where the Knicks are in terms of the personnel, that even if you switch it, there's a way to counter that for the Celtics. And if you want to switch it with Cat, they can run a Spain action, and Cat switches on to Tatum, and now you have the Spain back screener coming in and blowing Cat out of the play. Now Tatum can walk to the rim. There's so many things they were doing, knowing, all right, the Knicks are maybe they're playing drop as their base, but here are the 3 or 4 things they can go to. The Celtics, almost the next possession after the Knicks would utilize a new coverage, would have the counter just ready to go. And it speaks to the versatility. It speaks to the surgical nature of how Mazzulla coaches basketball on the offensive end. Just, he calls them not great white sharks, killer whales, in terms of like the way they can hunt prey. And it really feels that way. And for the Knicks, unfortunately, starting lineup has 2 that they can attack. The bench has a couple, especially with Shamet and Payne being in their 8-man rotation. So there just is so many areas they can go to and get an advantage. That's not just a good advantage, like a great one. Like a Porzingis post up for the Knicks is probably like a decent outcome in terms of like the other options. And it's still something that he is elite at scoring on in terms of like beating mismatches. So I don't know where the Knicks go. I don't know if Mitchell Robinson is the answer. In fact, against Boston, he's really has never been the answer. He never has been a great defender against a popping bigs. He's always struggled in that way. Go back to Brook Lopez, go to Miles Turner, Porzingis. He just hasn't defended those guys well. So I don't think he is the answer. And that just brings us back to the point of like, is the roster, especially on the defensive end, just so flawed because your 2 of your 5 players in the starting lineup are just easy targets. And Brunson, I thought, has in these 2 Boston games defended well, held up Porzingis one time, forced a turnover.
Yeah.
Switched almost on every possession in the second Boston game and held up well in that regard. But there's just going to be a pretty low ceiling in the impact on the defensive end for a guy like Brunson. And we know Cat struggles have been what they are, and you're just not getting all defense level performances from Anunoby, from Bridges to compensate for it, which I guess was the theory of the case coming into the year. That hasn't materialized. Anunoby in spurts, and he defended well on Sunday. I'll give him that. I thought on an individual basis, Anunoby had a really strong defensive game, but as the whole, I don't think Anunoby is defended at the level I think many Knicks fans assumed he could get to, especially considering the contract. So I think all those put together, you're left with a team like Boston just having too many avenues to pick at, and the Knicks just not able to mask those in a way because there's just too many counters, as you said, just in your question, there's just too many counters for the Celtics to go to for the Knicks to have a chance to slow them down at a rate where their offense could keep up with it, because their offense isn't playing like an elite offense. It's like a decent offense against these great teams, but that's not good enough considering how bad their defense has been.
Yeah, and I think that's where, I mean, no point in crying over spilled milk, but it's where you go back to losing Isaiah Hartenstein this summer. And I think who knows if the Knicks still make the Cat trade, but I think his ability to be so flexible, so smart defensively while holding it down in the glass, and then offensively, unlike Mitchell Robinson, give you at least like a modicum of spacing and playmaking. And then even then, I still think they might have needed a coach other than Tom Thibodeau, because I look back at last year and like Isaiah Hartenstein was like, if my memory serves, like maybe just because it's a little PTSD because it didn't sit well with me. That's what sticks in there. But I just have memory after memory of him being in drop and like KP just raining threes over the top. Like, but I do think the right coach with him in there, like that might have been a version of this team. Like if your lineup was hypothetically Brunson, Bridges, OG, Cat, Hartenstein, you could have made it work. I talked about like years ago now, but like the summer, like where the Knicks could have traded for Kristaps Porzingis again. I was like, this is exactly who they should be looking for. Like rim protector, like a guy who could beat a post up, guy who can bomb threes. And instead Boston goes and gets him for almost nothing, when the Knicks maybe could have gotten him for like, I don't know, Mitchell Robinson, a first round pick. That was honestly better than what I think the Wizards got one first back in that trade. Still crazy. The price was that low, even with his injury issues. And it just got to a point where like Boston is a flawless machine. And I can cite plays in that game. And this has been a frustration of mine all year, where it just looks like, I mean, obviously in transition, but even in the half court, like the Knicks just look disjointed, and it seems like they're confused what the scheme is. Like,
communication has been terrible this year.
Yeah. Like I think of the one where like Cat thought it was a switch, and he might've been right because obviously they were switching at times, but him and Payne both go at Derek White. And then it's just a one read hook pass over the top from White to KP for a three. You could look at the, there was another one where the Celtics ran a stagger screen for Derek White, and OG sort of half stunted out on it. And I think Brunson might have thought he was switching, and then OG basically ends up like clipping Brunson on like a self screen, and White just turns the corner, he gets the layup. But then I sit back and look, and to your point, like maybe it doesn't excuse it because it has definitely been an issue. But against a team like Boston that has like so many threats and runs such good stuff the mental load is such that those mistakes are inevitable and you have to bake them in and like acknowledge like maybe the only way to beat them is to lean into offense and hope and pray they don't shoot well for a series and you shoot incredibly well for a series. One final question for you, and we can keep it short. I think I have a gut instinct what your answer is because you've alluded to it throughout this show, but looking a little longer term, do you think the framework that the Knicks have put together with this roster, potentially with a different, more creative coach, is capable of having, I'll just say like serious title equity? I'm not even going to say win a championship, but like be in that mix where if they got those breaks, they can win a championship? Or do you think the premise of this team is flawed if that's the goal? All right, guys, to wrap up this fun two-parter with DJ, we have one more big question. Does this Knicks team actually have the personnel on their roster as generally constructed to go win a championship? We get into that next with DJ. But first, we want to tell you about our friends over at DoorDash. NBA fans, get ready. They swoosh, you save. Thanks to Dash Pass, every time a player drops 50 or more points in a game, you score a huge deal the next day. It's simple. When any player scores 50 or more in a game during the 24-25 NBA regular season, Dash Pass members get 50% off an order up to $10 off the next day from noon to midnight. Here's a few ways you can save on this deal. A game day feast after an epic 50-point performance. Celebrate by ordering wings, pizza, or burgers from your favorite spot delivered straight to your door. Late night cravings, whether you're staying up watching highlights or just need a midnight snack, use Dash Pass to grab something delicious while saving big. Or are you fueling your watch party, planning to catch the next game? Order your go-to snacks and meals at a discount and get ready for more high-scoring action. I'm having an Oscars party this weekend. I might just do that. So sign up at Dash Pass and be ready to save when any player scores 50 or more in a game. Dash Pass members get 50% off an order the next day, up to $10 off. Just use promo code NBA50 from noon to midnight after a 50-point game on eligible orders at participating merchants. Must have an active Dash Pass account. Terms apply. Visit DoorDash to learn more.
I don't know. And I think the part that I keep going back to is Cat has never been the anchor of a top 10 defense playing 5 full time. Just hasn't happened. And it's usually been in the 20s in terms of the defensive rating. And that's, I don't know if they're 20 yet, but I think they were 18 or 19 before the Boston game. So I think, they're closing in on a defense that is more bottom 10 than certainly middle 10, and forget top 10. That was a pipe dream that they were going to get to that point. So if you're not,
they are 20th right now.
They're 20th in defense right now, which, I know Denver won the championship a couple of years ago, but they were probably more like a 13th or 14th ranked defense that year, and positional size all over the floor. And Jokic, call like it is, just a better 5 defender than Cat is, because his ability to play out in space, just is better than where Cat is right now. So I think there is all the other things I think you can improve upon. I think you can probably get more out of your defensive wings. But the question is, your point guard, Jalen Brunson, your centers, Karl-Anthony Towns, can that duo ever, you can have the best coach in the world, can that coach figure out a way to get this team to on the edge or the cusp of a top 10 defense, which I think more times than not, you're going to need to have if you have serious title equity, especially considering this Boston team, even if they have some, regression or they lose a player here and there, maybe Drew Holiday, is just too expensive for them to retain long-term. They're going to be a top 6 or 7 defense, at least, if not better. So to compete with them, you're going to have to be much closer to top 10 than you are than bottom 10. And I just don't know if a Towns-led defense with him as the anchor is that. Now, that goes back to the Mitchell Robinson piece of it. While I don't think he is an effective defender against the Celtics, against most teams, I do think if you can think he can get back to his or close to the peak level defensive ability, then you could look at a defense where everyone sort of just like falls back into their normal or their best role. Cat as a 4, I think, has some real advantages. His size, His ability to straight line close out is good. And he gets in trouble when he has to drop and then change direction, slide, change direction. That's the part where he is a disaster. But when he can just load up early, show his size, be a big body in the lane, and then close out in one direction, I think he's actually pretty good. And then you can, you move Hart to the bench. It improves that area. Maybe the Mitchell Robinson piece of it is a little bit underrated because you just haven't seen him. But again, how do you count on him long term? You probably can't. And then is there another center you can bring in to play alongside Cat? Because I just have a lot of questions about how you defend with him playing the 5 full time. I've just, I know the narrative and the history coming into this year, but to see it and to see the limitations, I think has just made it crystal clear that it's hard for me to imagine Karl-Anthony Towns defending at a level to get a team to be top 10, top 15, because I think that's where you need to be. And I'm very skeptical that could be the case. So that's where we're at. Now, what do you do to sort of, do you just wait the Celtics out? You could probably compete with Cleveland with this team. I mean, I don't know if that's where you want to go, but Towns to 5 has to be, other than the coach, has to be the other piece of it that you're as an organization are trying to figure out, like, is this a sustainable model in this league in 2025 to have that sort of defender be our anchor? That's a huge question mark. And I'd hope they're trying to figure it out like right now.
Yeah. And to your point, I mean, we both talked about this a lot, but I'll mention it one more time. We saw Minnesota like make a Western Conference Finals. Not that Mitchell Robinson's Rudy Gobert, but with a similar template and having like Mike Conley, who I think I would argue Jalen Brunson at this point is a better defender than Mike Conley is, and Karl-Anthony Towns is the 4, and then 2 through 4 were obviously extremely, or they're 2 and 3 were obviously extremely solid. And McDaniels and Edwards, nominally Bridges and Anunoby can do that. And like the thing you said about slot everyone in their correct position, it immediately made me think about what's happening with the Warriors right now and the impact Jimmy Butler's had there, where all their other guys look better because of what he brings to the table offensively. The only issue is that Mitchell Robinson is not as accessible as Jimmy, because Jimmy obviously gives you a whole lot on the other end of the floor, while Mitch like creates some problems there. But that is a deeper conversation for another day that I'm sure we'll have on this podcast. DJ, before I let you go, I wanted to give you an opportunity to tell everyone about the new Patreon tier you guys have over at Knicks Film School. I'm obviously a longtime fan of you and Benji. I think you guys are 2 of, I don't know, like the 3 or 4 best people doing this, breaking down film, making people smarter Knicks fans. And it's really exciting because you guys like, and I know that this isn't full time for either of you. I was really excited to hear that you're leaning into it even more and putting even more out there that people can enjoy and frankly learn a lot from.
Well, Gavin, thank you. And thank you again for inviting me on. It's always a pleasure doing this with you. And the Patreon, it's the Brunson tier, which is a new one that Benji and I started. So it's a lot of film breakdowns from my part, mailbags that I do, if not weekly, bi-weekly. Then Benji will do his enhanced grade book every week or every game, excuse me. So with film involved with that. So a lot of content that we're putting out there, podcasts with Matt Grebe. So a lot of cool things, I think, that, for when we started, we wanted to make sure that we were able to provide content that was, commensurate with what we were asking in terms of, subscribing to us. So I think we've done that, and we're going to continue to put out, I think, high quality content that is, film based, as you talked about. And I think that's, it's what I think we do best, and, something we're going to lean into. So there's that. And obviously Knicks Film School, subscribe to our YouTube channel, trying to get to 20,000 subscribers before the end of the year. We have the public film sessions weekly. Benj and I kind of alternate on that. So expect one on Thursday. And, it's a lot of cool stuff, the Knicks content world, you guys, Knicks Film School, Knicks Fan TV, just a lot of great stuff happening. I think if you kind of take a step back, it's a really cool ecosystem to be a part of, and just happy to do it and happy to obviously do this with you.
Yeah, it was a blast, man. And
Thank you.
I'll say it, like, I think every other Knicks content creator watches what you guys do, and it makes everyone else better because we're that much smarter for it. So one more time, I can't recommend that enough. For DJ, I'm Gavin. We'll talk to you soon on both Locked On Knicks and, of course, Knicks Film School.